The principles of true art is not to portray, but to evoke. Jerzy Kaczynski. This is The Artful Painter, art lessons for artists, collectors, and people who love art. Shanna Kunz is a contemporary landscape painter whose work is a conscious play of mood, light, and color. As a naturalist raised and rooted in the diverse landscapes of Western America, a painting takes on deeper meaning for her. Each location is an encounter of her spirit with the land, the trees, and the waters that have always given her a sense of connection and order. When a location intrigues and inspires her, she paints the scenes into a series using a range of keys or themes, experimenting and searching to learn more about the natural threads that tie the landscape together with complexity, subtlety, and more importantly, balance. Shanna looks for new ways to express spatial relationships and distance with layers of paint, brushwork, gradations, and diffusions of light. Shanna says that hopefully her study of the landscape will bring her somewhat closer to an honest translation of both soul and land. I think she succeeds splendidly on that count. To that end, she pushes color and value into new compositions and continues a lifelong effort to communicate the emotional connection she feels with the environment. Indeed, when you view her paintings, you sense the serene, contemplative quietness and solitude of the landscape. Between you and the landscape she paints, Shanna Kunz is actively forging a visual connection. My name is Carl Olson, and this is The Artful Painter. Well, Shanna, I really appreciate you being on The Artful Painter today. I've been looking forward to this for quite some time.
Me too. I have too, very definitely.
Well, I'm for those that are looking at the video part of this podcast, I'm seeing you in a beautiful studio there. You have a beautiful painting behind you. Where are you located right there?
In Ogden, Utah. This was an old parking garage back in the 1900s that went to an old hotel, and it's been turned into quite a few things, and then it was dilapidated for 40 years. And then we had a developer here in Ogden, his name's Thane Fisher, saw the potential, came in and turned it into 41 studio spaces. There's an event center upstairs. Downstairs is going to be a creative space too, but it will have more industrial things. But there's 41 artists in here, and I just love it. I just love working down here. It's got such a great energy to it.
That's got to be an exciting, multidisciplinary influence to be immersed in right there. That would be a cool place to be.
There's glassmakers, there's sculptors, there's painters, there's photographers, just a little bit of everything.
Is there a retail space? Is it open to the public?
Well, we all get to decide when we're open and when we're not, but we try and all be here for like the gallery stroll first Fridays. And then if they have any events, we all try and be here, but it's still studio space. It's up to us.
Very nice. Well, it's great to have an inspiring workspace there.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. Well, I have been looking forward to having you on the show, and it's great to be able to have this opportunity to talk with you. And I'd like to just start off with, you seem like a very positive person.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
I'm a glass half full kind of person.
Well, I tend to be the other way. and I try very hard to go above the halfway line sometimes. But positivity is really nice. And I see it in your paintings. There's a certain moodiness, I guess, but not. I don't mean that in a negative way. Sometimes you look at something and it's contemplative. It's melancholy in the sense that it makes you think, or it immerses you in that environment. And I'd like to explore, where does that come from within you?
Funny, I had somebody come in the other day and say, if you don't mind me saying this, your paintings look a little lonely. And I thought, well, all right, that's not quite what I see, but what they are is very much sentimental. Everything I paint has some really strong sentiment to me. When I was a kid, my dad worked for the Forest Service, and we moved every year and a half of my life until I was almost 17 years old.
We have a connection.
Oh,
My grandfather was in the Forest Service in Suches, Georgia.
My dad had some friends that got transferred down around Gainesville area working for the Forest Service. But Utah was always home. But when you move every year and a half, you learn to adapt. But my only really strong ties were family ties, and certainly family ties to Utah. So I was always missing home, and we always came home in the summertime. Our vacations were really based around camping and fishing. My dad is a fly fisherman that learned from his dad, who learned from his dad. In fact, he's got tackle and the fly making stuff that's so old, and I know how to tie a fly, but I can't fish. But,
well, it's an art form in itself, isn't it?
It is. So I went to Utah State to study figure work, thinking that's what I was going to do, is be a figure painter. And when I didn't take the math and the science, I only took all the art classes because I absolutely knew what I wanted to do. And I got out of school and painted my first landscape and went, oh, this is it. This is what I want to do. So
was that just a lark? You just said, well, let me go paint a landscape, or had that been percolating in the back of your mind to do that?
Well, I had tried a few of them and gotten really frustrated, but that was before I went to school, and I went back to school as an adult. When I was going to school when I was young, I would have gone for administrative assistant, not as an artist, because who would have ever thought you could make a living as an artist? So I went back in my 30s and learned so much about art history. That was my tuition that was worth the library, just going to the library and bringing home like a dozen books every 2 weeks. And I found George Inness in there. And that was like, oh, I love this. I have to do this. Because it was a whole different way of looking at landscapes. But I really kind of focused on American art because I feel like culturally we're different. We're immediate. We're impatient. We jump in with both feet. And we are very independent in that we all insist on having our own style and not doing a real formal training. So all the art history masters that I've studied are American painters, or almost all American painters. I mean, of course, I've studied Monet and all of that too.
It sounds like you were heavily influenced by the tonalists.
Very much so. Especially and I started off as a watercolorist. I did watercolor for 12 years before I ever oil painted.
Really?
Yeah, and I think you can see that in my work. And in fact, I have to fight myself constantly to get some paint down there because of it.
I did watch some of your videos, and it does. You start off with a very thin wash of color, and then slowly build up on that, much like a watercolorist might do. Not that I'm an expert in watercolor. I can see that. Yeah,
and people always will say that it's exactly the opposite. In watercolor, you go from light to dark, and oils, you go from dark to light. And I never really found that to be necessarily true for either. I just jump in with both feet with both of them. But I do find myself mostly doing oil now because I just love the viscosity of it and trying to build up some texture. And
the paint itself becomes a subject sometimes when we're painting.
Yes. Yeah, it does. That being said, there are two types of painters, and one is the painters that love to play with the process of it. They're process oriented. They love the paint. They love playing. I am a visual person. It does come down to the visual part of it for me, and that's where that sentiment comes in. These are all places that I watched my family camp that I spent lots of time with. Almost every place that I paint, everything that I paint has a really strong sentiment for me.
It's an interesting idea about process versus the end result, the imagery. In having a number of conversations with different artists, that seems to be true. Some are very much into the process. They throw themselves into paint. They find it relaxing or enthralling. I've talked to others that said it's absolutely miserable creating the painting, but they love seeing the end result. Yeah.
Cal, and I love both. I love the process too, but I always just have such a strong sense of the feeling that I want the painting to come at the end, that everything that I do is about that mood, that feeling of how I want it. So that I would like to consider my paintings like intimate conversations with very familiar places for me. That's how it feels, like a conversation.
What does that mean to have that conversation with nature as far as being a painter?
For me, a lot of it is memories. And remembering a place that I visited as a child, remembering a place that was very important to my uncles, to my dad. My dad is a huge influence in my life. And he was the one that always told us to have an adventure no matter what you do. No matter where you go or what you do, make it an adventure. And so that conversation really has a lot to do with memories, and it has a lot to do with understanding my environment and understanding how the tree grows. He was also into geology, so everywhere we went, he would, and I live in Utah, so southern Utah especially, how old is this land? How did the plains and the mesas get to where they were? I mean, everything was a conversation about the area, about the elements. That was a pretty big deal, the shape of a tree, why the tree grows the way it grows, what elevation certain trees grow at. I mean, those dynamics were just important.
That sounds like, I guess, myself, what I'm talking. How did that tree get to be that way?
Exactly.
How did the great nonconformity in the Grand Canyon happen? What is that?
Just like that. We are just like that. How did that person come to be this? No one is perfect. Everyone has their seasons that maybe were a little rougher and the seasons that they shined. And I relate that. I relate the experience of the landscape to the experience of humanity too.
So you mentioned memories being a big part of that, and the memories that are called to mind. I wonder just how much your paintings, are they from memory? Are they from outdoors? It's probably not as a literal interpretation of what you see.
Right. They come from all three. I try and spend as much time painting outdoors as possible, except for this sounds lame, but I'm not out painting in 25-degree weather. I might be painting in my car if I can handle 50-degree weather, but I'm not that kind of a diehard. But they are so familiar that, I can move elements here and there and pretty much know what I'm talking about because I've painted enough time. And I also love my photography. I would never sell my photography because it's just for me, but I'm pretty decent with a camera.
Oh, nice. I think there's a lot that painters can learn from photography. And photography can be informed by painting.
Oh, absolutely. I agree.
I think of the value system that Ansel Adams came up with, the zone system, right?
And Stieglitz. Oh,
yeah.
Man, you were fantastic and able to simplify things the way a painter does. So, yeah, there's a lot to learn. what I usually do is it's about composition and the thumbnails. And then I like to do a lot of thumbnails because I work with notans almost exclusively. In fact, I work with the notan till the very end, and then I might go back and look at the photograph. But it's really important to me. I think the only way I can get emotion out of a painting is by simplifying at its core.
Well, it's preparation.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So are you doing that in a sketchbook?
Yeah, I do it in
Scrappies?
sketchbooks and any paper I can get my hands on, and receipts and napkins. And it's really hard sometimes for me to go find everything because it's scattered from here to eternity.
Yeah, I enjoyed talking with Dan Young a couple of years ago, and he mentioned doing things on the back of a napkin. So.
Oh, whatever it takes, just
Yeah.
whatever it takes. And whenever I start something, whenever I have something in mind, well, I always work in series. What that series is can be completely different, but if say I'm in the mood for, in fact, my newest series is called the Dreaming Tree series. I love Dave Matthews and that's band, and that song, The Dreaming Tree, has always really spoke to me. So this whole series that I'm doing right now is about the Dreaming Tree and the mood and the feeling of what one single tree has to say, the type of tree or how it reaches out. When I'm making a series, I'll decide I'm going to do one in high key, one in low key, one in high contrast, one in low contrast. I'll come up with at least a dozen different ideas of how I could do that.
In just the one subject.
Just a one subject. Or it could be, maybe I'm going to do 4 seasons, or maybe I'm going to do a river series or a cottonwood series. It keeps me always intrigued for the very next one. I'm always working towards the next painting, what I've learned from this painting to take into the next painting. And instead of each piece, me thinking I have to create this amazing piece, it feels like research for me instead of creating this amazing piece. Everything is, let's try this, and let's put that in a high key, which my favorite paintings of all are high key. Whistler, Twatman, all those high key paintings just make my heart pitter patter. So I find myself doing a little bit of that, of that myself.
So that goes to using an approach to create an emotional response.
Absolutely. And really compressed values, compressed color temperatures, a compressed palette really can bring a strong mood. Are you familiar with Dwight Tryon's work?
No, I'm not. I feel like I'm probably an ignoramus here.
Oh, wait. So he's in the Freer Museum on the Mall in D.C. Yeah. And the Freer Museum has a lot of Whistlers, too. But the first time I saw one of Dwight Tryon's pieces and his little skinny trees and the mood, they just took my breath away. Just took my breath away.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, you will definitely love the work. You'll love the work.
That's why I like doing this show. I learned all kinds of new things and new people to check out.
Isn't it wonderful?
Yeah,
and
it is.
Such nice people. I could talk art. In fact, so Elizabeth Robbins lives right next door to me. In fact, that's how the Bellamuse Productions and Inspired to Paint came about. And when my husband has had enough of my art talk, he just points.
Go next door.
Over there. I've had enough. And for us, it's a way of life. It isn't a job. It's our entire way of life. It's our passion.
Well, I want to get back to what you were talking about with Elizabeth. I know you two have a venture, and we'll explore that a little bit. But just before we wrap up this thing on series, this is kind of an interesting idea to me, because I admit when I first started painting, I was hesitant to do series because, and this is what goes through, I think, many beginners' minds. You're thinking about the cost of the material. You're thinking about you're under a tremendous pressure to create a finished product and then move on to the next subject. And I have since learned that was not a good attitude to have for myself, that I need to repeat things to get better, just like you would repeat scales, I guess, on a guitar or something.
Absolutely. Or keys on the piano, chords on a piano. Absolutely. It's up to art history. It's up to art history to say what is good and what isn't good. It certainly is not up to me. I don't think it's up to any of us that are alive. We have no control over that. It's only my job to get better and better and better at what I do. And I kind of work in baby steps. I'm not this great big jumping, huge leaps kind of person. And the series works really well for me. I can explore so many different things and still have one thing familiar. So I've got a good footing of the one thing that's familiar. And then I'm able to reach out to the unfamiliar and something that might make me a little more nervous or a little more challenging.
Nice. So when you're seeking out an emotional response in your paintings, you're not necessarily depicting the scene exactly as it's shown.
No. Very, very rarely. Very rarely does it come out that way. I like to, before a series, I really like to do some brainstorming. I'll get my notebook and I will, sometimes the name of the series will come first. Sometimes the painting comes first and then others come from there. And then I'll write a little emotional brainstorming words about it and kind of like peeling back the layers of the onion. I studied with Dan Pinkham one time, and he writes poetry about what he's going to paint before he paints it so that it's evoking an emotion. I'm not a very good poet, but I'm a pretty good brainstormer. So I'll write details and set out my boundaries, which is this is going to be a high key, low contrast in this palette. And I'll just write ideas out and then kind of go back and attach an emotion to it.
Right.
And then I'll start doing thumbnails. And for each thumbnail each painting I'm going to do, I do at least 3 or 4 thumbnails that gives me different options of shape placement or value patterns, if it's like with the high key or the low key, and simplify it as much as possible, figure out what information needs to be left out or if something needs to be put in. And then I will brainstorm about the lighting situations, the moods, just give myself as many options as possible before I start a series.
Do you go back and look at those notes after you've done that series?
I do. They're like memories to me as well. I'm the most sentimental person. It's really kind of disgusting because I probably hang on to things way too long. But I go back and look at some of those notes and feel a connection to it, like they're my babies. And sometimes I go back and explore them again too.
The idea that you have all these notes and drawings and sketches and thumbnails associated with a painting, and those paintings get sold. Does the matter of including those developmental drawings ever come up in the sale of a painting?
Mm-mm.
You're not letting those go, huh?
No, those are mine. Not only that, sometimes there's really personal things that I write on them that I don't necessarily want the whole world to see. My dad's father died when he was little. When he was, in fact, I wasn't even born yet when my grandpa died. So my dad raised his brothers, and one of my uncles is only about 6 years older than me. So we were a huge family by the time you put all of his brothers in there, and I lost one of my dear uncles about 4 years ago, and that entire series was dedicated to him. From the Uinta Mountains, a place that we would go camping up in called Christmas Meadows, and it was very, very personal. And I couldn't let go of something like that for anything.
Sure. Well, I've seen some people do it, not very many. I would have mixed feelings about it myself. But now as a buyer, I am a bit voyeuristic there because I want to see those intimate thoughts, not just who owned the painting, but the thoughts that went behind it. It's something I've gotten into with these old books that I buy, and I see an inscription. It inspires me. I want to know the story behind it.
Oh, that's the best thing about art history is when you read why someone does what they do, what things influence them to do what they do. It gives you permission to do what you do. Otherwise, it would be too intimidating to feel like I could paint a painting that might last 200 years or be worth a certain amount of money. But because they had the guts to just follow their heart, I can follow mine. That's what art history does for me.
So you mentioned earlier that you didn't feel like you were much of a poet, but I'm going through some of your paintings. So, I'm looking at the titles: Crossing Over, Staccato Sunrise, Cherished Grounds, Graceful Stewards, Monument Valley. I mean, some are literal, but others are very interpreted. They give an idea to the viewer as to what the theme of this painting might be.
Yes.
I think that's very poetic.
They are definitely interpretive. And I play the piano, and music has always been a huge part of my life, and a lot of classical music. So there's many times I'll use a musical term because it feels right. Beethoven, I just love Beethoven. So some of those Moonlight Sonatas and Reveries, and they're paintings. That's a painting to me.
So I get it now. So Staccato Sunrise, for those so they can't see this, but they see the trees go. It's almost looks like a musical score.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
A ton of eighth
There's
notes.
a rhythm.
Yeah.
There's a rhythm to them that's not unlike dance. It's not unlike music. It's all the arts have a certain amount of rhythm of taking you through the painting.
Classical is what you like to play?
Yes, I do.
Do you ever compose on the piano?
No. I wish I was that good, but you kind of have to pick which discipline is the most important. And painting came into my life, and everything else went the wayside.
I had a keyboard, but I never really, I still have one, but I never really learned how to play. But I love music. And paintings do remind me of music. One of my first jobs was in graphic design, was doing album covers.
Oh, that would be so much fun.
Oh man, that was an awesome introduction to that profession and art direction, and marrying the music and the theme of the art. Of course, today everything is just download, so you don't really have the album art like you used to have.
I know. I used to love. I have an album collection, an LP collection. I bet I have 250 albums still. So that was another thing about moving around my whole life, is because we were homesick, because we were so far away from home, music became a huge factor in my life. So you can mention almost any song and I can tell you the year that it was born, that it was made, and exactly what I was doing the first time I heard it. I relate everything to music. And so sometimes, like I called that Dreaming Tree series, I love the emotion of Dave Matthews ballads, and that's how that Dreaming Tree came in. You'll see even some contemporaries, the names of their songs in some of my paintings.
That is really fascinating to me. Do you listen to music as you paint?
Oh, yes, loudly.
What do you listen to?
It's not always classical. I probably shouldn't admit this, but I just love the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
I don't think there's anything wrong in admitting that. I have a very eclectic taste in music, so it's always fascinating.
Me too. I have a very eclectic taste, and it kind of depends on the mood of the painting. But yeah, I love my music.
Yeah, I tend toward, when I'm painting, I have a hard time with music that has words in it. It messes with my mind. Other people love to, and then I'll get emails from people saying they listen to the podcast while they paint, and I'm grateful for that. But I personally can't do that. So the way my mind is wired, I find myself listening to ambient music. I may listen to Brian Eno, Roger Eno, Harold Budd, very quiet, contemplative, shimmering piano or something like that, because it's very restful to me to hear that, and it kind of matches the mood of what I'm doing.
For me, it's kind of the opposite. I listen to this rock, loud music and create these really quiet paintings. And sometimes I'll listen to quiet music and create a little more vibrant painting. It's very odd. When I'm down here at this studio, I can't listen to my music quite as loudly as when I'm at my home studio. But
yeah, when you're home, you can crank it up.
Yes, I can.
All right. It's a fascinating topic to me, this idea of what do you listen to when you paint, because it really highlights the diversity of the way we all work and create. And how
our brains work.
Yes.
And everybody's brain is wired so differently.
And aren't we glad for that?
Yes. So Elizabeth and I had a gallery for 5 years called Bellamuse Gallery. And we had to create a playlist that had her music and my music, because we are completely the opposite. She's John Denver and quiet, melodic music, and I couldn't put all of mine on our list.
Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yeah. Tom Petty, Led Zeppelin.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So your next show, you're going to have Led Zeppelin Stairway to Heaven, huh? Here in the South, it was the Allman Brothers.
Oh, and,
Leonard Skinner. Freebird. So I want to get back to your friend. You mentioned your friend Elizabeth Robbins. And,
yes.
And you two are working together
on
a new venture. So I'd like to know about that venture.
Well, we were in similar galleries together, and we kind of got to know each other through the galleries and through Facebook. And she was moving back. The first time I met her in life, she was moving back from Kansas. She had just lost her husband. And she had moved back to Utah because she was raised in Salt Lake. And then she left again and came back about 3 years later, back from Colorado. And I told her, you really should look at Ogden, because we're at the base of the mountains. It's a beautiful town, but we've had a horrible reputation because it was an old railroad town. Al Capone actually used to be afraid of Ogden. And then when I was growing up, it was just let's just call it more colorful part of Utah.
Well, I get it. I read the book Nothing Like It in the World by Stephen Ambrose.
Oh,
about the train coming through north of there.
Yep. Yeah, it was a pretty wild town. And she grew up in Salt Lake, and the predominant religion here is Latter-day Saints, LDS. And she grew up in a neighborhood that was much more calm, and I was a little more rebellious up here in Ogden. But I said, you should come look in Ogden. Houses are very inexpensive. It's beautiful, and they're making huge changes to the place. And she said, I am not moving to Ogden. So I said, just come look. The house next door to me just went up for sale. Just come look at it. Well, she did it to appease me only, and she bought the house right next door to me. So first of all, we bought beanbags, chairs, so we could go back and have some art discussions between our studios. And then one day we were taking our dogs for a walk around the block, taking a break. And I said, wouldn't it be so much fun to have studio space together? And she said, yeah, what would that look like? And I said, let's pretend. So I said, let's pretend it has big, tall ceilings. Let's pretend we have north light. Let's pretend it's big enough that we can have classes in there and we could sell if we wanted to. Within 2 weeks, we were signing a lease for exactly what we could afford. And we had that gallery for 5 years, and we had a ball with it. And we got to carry Cindy Barron. We got Mitch Baird. I mean, we got to carry some really good names. But we were both working 3 full-time jobs between that and painting and everything else. So after 5 years, we both decided it was time. And this place came open. And so we rented 2 studios right next to each other.
So you have independent space, but
We have independent space, yeah. And she works more from home because she's a still life painter and paints all of her own flowers, 120 rose bushes, sunflowers, dahlias, you name it, she's got it. And she works more from there than here, and I work probably more from here than in my home studio. But we are equally as passionate about what we do. And both of us have been teaching for a very long time. And yet our styles are completely different. So we decided at COVID time, when all of our workshops got canceled, let's just do this. Let's just create an online platform. And we worked like crazy to get it going, but we both love teaching. And I would hope to think that shows in the quality of our product. We have art history in there. We have business tips. We have long videos, concept lessons, all the nuts and bolts, conversations, everything that we would have liked to have had when we were learning. So it's really fun. We enjoy it. It's a lot of work, but we love it.
So it's not just taking a tutorial, learn how to oil paint. It's
we do
more
critiques.
Than that.
Yeah, we do critiques, challenges, and we've got all kinds of other ideas in store too. It's just a matter of coming up with enough time for it all.
Do you do like a call-in session, like once a month or something like that, or?
We can do that.
Mm-hmm.
For an hour, we have like hour-long body of work portfolio reviews. If somebody would like to purchase that. Other than that, they still can send us their work anytime, and we'll give them a critique. We like it to feel like you actually have a teacher, not that it's just a video that you watch, that you really feel like you have a teacher.
It's not just a bunch of online DVDs that you buy and download.
No.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. It's a lot more than that.
So you're adding content on a regular basis to it?
All the time, every month. Every month there's 4 new videos, a new art history. Art history means so much to me that was a big deal for me, is to be able to put that in.
Well, I'm intrigued. What was your last lesson about?
So it was primarily, the art history is about Charles Warren Eaton and all of his nocturnes and very solid, simple shapes. They called him the white pine tree painter.
Why did they call him that?
Because he painted so many of those beautiful, big white pines in the dark. They were just such symbolic, simplified shapes. So beautiful.
Somebody else I need to go check out.
Oh, incredible painter. He painted actually with Whistler too. So.
Well, this sounds interesting to me, because your course is not really the right word for it, is it? I'm trying to think. It's a membership site.
It's a membership site. Yeah, but we call them courses because whatever my my main video is, I try and do all the concept lessons and the art history and the conversations kind of around that same thing. And so does Elizabeth. She's doing figure this month, and different skin tones, how to draw the figure, how to lay the planes in. So we call them courses because they're kind of all inclusive with lots of different information. If she and I can tie our lessons together, we do. But it's for the full comprehensive package, it's $39 a month. If you just want to watch the videos without the other things, it's $29 a month. Then we have a free one for that have time-lapse videos and things like that.
Very nice. That's quite reasonable.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just amazing that we can stay connected this way.
I love that. Yeah. I just love that all the artists we just have our own little world that we get to live in. And there's nothing better for me than to see somebody else fall in love with the same thing that I have fallen in love with. It just makes me so excited.
Well, I think it's fascinating that so many artists do take up teaching, and they love teaching, passing on that craft so that others can pick it up too. And not view them as competition, but as partners in this wonderful life of creation that we can do.
And develop confidence in themselves. The act of creating just brings something so beautiful to a person that might not be able to experience that in any way. You can watch someone become confident in what they do and start learning to express themselves. And let's face it, when you do a good painting, there is nothing better.
Oh, of course.
I love
pretty good.
Yeah, you do. Until the next painting, or until 3 days later, and you don't like it at all. But
I'm still waiting for that painting. But yeah, I visualize it'll be a really good feeling.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's something I've been thinking about. When first learning, there is a bit of timidity to the learning process.
Oh my gosh,
you're very
it's
timid.
Just scary. Oh, it's so scary. You're wearing your heart on the sleeve out there for everybody to see.
Oh my goodness, yes.
And people can be mean sometimes and say, that does not look like that, or that's a horrible painting. And
yeah, I do prefer the nice approach, but I have heard some artists say that they purposely sought out somebody that would be harsh with them.
Yes.
More power to them. I'm not
good at that.
No.
I'm good at finding the beautiful things that somebody does and then maybe encouraging them in this direction or that direction. I'm not, I certainly don't think my way is the only way. I think that there's many different beautiful ways of painting.
Well, my wife's brother-in-law says the teacher will come when the student is ready. So
very good.
Right? And and there's a matching up of the teaching style and what will work for the student.
Absolutely. Just like the energy of a painting.
Yeah.
The energy of a painting, there's this tangible object that the heart and soul of one person meets the heart and soul of another person on this tangible object. And most of the time I find that the people who buy my work become pretty dear friends because we have other commonalities. It's not just the only commonality.
Well, there's a connection there.
Yeah.
That's what I like about the analog arts, is there's a connection with the person who created it and the people who buy it, enjoy it.
Yeah. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Shanna, one of the things I like to do and is really peer into your workshop. I'm doing that right now. I'm looking into your studio. It's a nice setup there.
I even cleaned it for you today.
Oh, you didn't have to do that.
I'm usually kind of messy, so.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to I'm curious about what you paint with, what you like to paint on, and the materials that you use. I'd like for you to talk about that for a minute.
Well, I am fortunate enough to be a spokesperson for Princeton, and it's mostly because I love their brushes so much. They're soft enough like a watercolor brush. Some of their watercolor brushes work beautiful. I like the Catalyst ones and the Aspen brand, and then the Dakota brand. The Dakota brand is a little softer, and so I can do some real scrubbing. I'm not easy on brushes. In fact, look, this is how I clean them. Bad. I keep them in solvents.
I think I've gotten terrible. I hardly ever clean a brush other than wipe and oil.
Yeah, me too. Because I'm always working. So I think I'm not going to take the time to clean them because I'll just be back in 8 hours using them again. So they really hold up. But I'm hard on brushes. I scrub with the side of them. I use them because I was a watercolorist. I find when I'm painting, my hands are holding the brushes in different ways than most oil painters. I don't ever just paint directly on. And I use a brush to its very full extent that I can possibly make it.
So are you holding it like at the end, or you might hold it like a pencil sometimes, depending on what you're doing? Or
it's usually at the end, but sometimes if I'm going behind something,
right.
If I'm painting a negative shape, my brain tells me it's negative, so I might come up high or up underneath. It's a way of thinking.
It's your handwriting.
I'm hard on them.
It's your handwriting, yeah.
It is my handwriting.
I find I'll be pushing down to I don't know if that's a good thing to do, but I end up ruining brushes when I do. But it achieves a certain type of mark when you sometimes push the paint as opposed to draw it, pull it.
I think it's really important to be authentic with your brushwork, more than have it be technical or pretty. Just to back that up, I went, BYU had a Maynard Dixon exhibit, and right as you walked in, there was a beautiful Sargent portrait next to this Maynard Dixon, a smaller Maynard Dixon piece. Well, I beelined it for the Sargent, thinking that is going to be the thing that I just fall in love with. Not that I wasn't in love with it, but I'm looking at that beautiful polished brushstroke, and then I look over at that Dixon, and that Dixon, you can feel dirt in the paint. You can see his every process, his whole thought process in his brushwork. It was so authentic that from there then on out, that was my goal. Is I don't need to have pretty brushwork. I just need it to reflect my thinking and have it be authentic.
Do you just use mostly flats to do that with?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
That's such a
And
versatile.
I'm really liking the long ones now too, the Egberts. I'm starting to really like those as well.
Very nice. What would I find on your palette? I see your palette in the background, but what kind of paint would I find on that?
Mostly Gamblin, because they do such a good job at promoting the health of the artist. And I love Daniel Smith. Being a watercolorist, I love Daniel Smith, all the quinacridones and transparent colors. I still like to work very transparently, just like I did with my watercolor. I think Utrecht's got a really great solid paint too, a very affordable solid paint. For the most part, they're Gamblin colors. And then Neo McGilp, love.
That's your medium of choice then?
Love my medium of choice, yeah.
I can't remember. Is that does it dry quick? Is it an alkyd-based medium or is it?
It is, but it's not. It doesn't dry quite as quickly as Galkid does.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it goes Galkid light, then Galkid, and then Neoma Gilp in the way of drying. But it's got some resin in it too, so it plumps the painting up just a little bit.
So it retains the brush stroke.
Mm-hmm. And I've really been enjoying the cold wax too. I like plopping a little cold wax in with it too to try and build that texture up.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
I have to play tricks on myself to get actual paint down because of that watercolor in me. So that's one of my tricks.
Yeah, I've experimented just a tad with cold wax. I'm not. I like the effect that you could get with it, with the textures building up the paint. I was used to that. I think the first medium I actually worked in was acrylic, and there you can just go crazy with this stuff. You can build things up. Yeah. You can build up textures with gels and things like that, and do it affordably. Whereas oils were not so affordable.
Yeah, it's a little more expensive.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a brand snob with this. I use whatever will work, but I have found that Gamblin has worked well for me. Yeah. And then what do you like to paint on?
I work on Clausen 66 single oil prime linen, and then my husband mounts it with laminol, heat activated adhesive, onto gator board. I really like the gator board because it takes all the weight out of it, but I like that linen surface. I've started playing a little bit more with the Clausens 13 and 14, and I'm liking that too, but primarily the 66 is my favorite. But yeah, I like the Clausens. I used to use canvas. I used to use cotton canvas, and I liked it then, but as soon as I put a solid surface behind it, that was the end of stretched.
Yeah, I'm experimenting with more hardwood panel. I had a big supply of stretch canvases that I had bought, and they were pre-stretched, and they're almost all gone. And so now I'm making my own panels there. Yeah, I always enjoy doing this deep dive into your studio there. So thanks for pulling the covers back and letting us see what you do and what you paint on.
You bet.
I mean, ultimately, what we create, I don't think the materials matter. They do matter, but they don't matter as much as we might make them out to be, right? I mean, I've known great paintings to be created with student grade paints.
Absolutely. If you want to paint, you'll make it happen. You'll make anything a tool. Yeah, you'll make it happen. You can't wait for the perfect light and the perfect everything, or it just will never happen.
You mentioned earlier that when you went to art school, you were bringing home a ton of books to read. Mm-hmm. You're still a voracious reader, I understand.
Yes.
So is there any art book that you recommend or that you're reading right now or have just recently read that you think the Artful Painter audience would enjoy?
Well, the Art Spirit, of course. I mean, that should just be everybody's Bible, is that Robert Henright Art Spirit. I love that. And I love the War of Art because it helps.
Is that the press? Is that, what is it? Pressfield? Stephen Pressfield?
Yes, it is. It gives you that feeling of, all right, it's okay if I do this. I can do this. I love that. I have really been intrigued with dynamic symmetry the last 2 years and have been studying that. Tavis Glover has a really great book. It's not cheap, but it's packed with information on dynamic symmetry. Now, that being said, math and I are not friends. So trying to figure out the roots templates for those is a little more challenging for me. What I've found that I do is find a template that works in my format and kind of just transfer that template to my panel and then start placing objects on the tangents.
So is that where I've noticed with your paintings, they're not the standard photography sizes, which I like. I'm glad that you don't follow that. Like 16 by 20, 11 by 14, 8 by 10. Those were standards that were set by the photo printing industry years ago.
Yes. But they don't make for the best formats.
No, they don't. I don't like them.
They really don't.
The only format I liked in photography that I thought was good was, I call it the Hasselblad or the Rolleiflex square negative. The square. is a great compositional tool. So square paintings are fascinating to me, and I do a lot of them. But
so do I.
But you also have 16 by 30s, I've noticed, in other sizes. So does that come from that
and dynamic? 20 by 60s, 24 by 60s. Yeah. It really kind of... So after I brainstorm my series and what that's going to be, then I come up with my formats. After the series is already kind of mapped out in my head. And sometimes a series is a format. I've done quite a few series that is nothing but squares. And squares just have a way of making something feel a little more contemporary, a little more modern for me. And I love to have to respond to that. I just have never found your standard sizes to be very eventful.
So how did you decide, say, like we talked about Staccato Sunrise earlier, so that's a 16 by 30-inch painting. Mm-hmm. So where did that 16 by 30 come from? How did you decide it's going to be that size?
Well, I didn't quite want it to be a 32. I didn't want it to be a 1-to-2 ratio. I wanted it, but I wanted that feeling with just a little less than that. I do like a 16 by 20. If there's one standard size that I enjoy painting, it's a 16 by 20. But I just wanted to push it just a little bit further. I wanted that I wanted that horizontal feel just a little bit more. So I just stretched it out just a little bit, without it going a full 32 inches.
I think that's close to a 16 by 9. Which is high definition.
Absolutely. I have to do. And you know what? I find myself cropping images a lot to that 16 by 9. Let's face it. We are all affected by technology, whether we know it or not, whether it's intentional or not intentional. And just about everything that we see now, knowing how to make a website and all the images to go with that, everything's 16:9, and you can't not be affected by that.
Well, I think it's fascinating that you do consciously decide on aspect ratios. This is something that's always interested me, is the deliberate choice of what is my framing size going to be, rather than just falling upon the defaults that are offered in the art stores.
Oh, you would love that Tavis Glover book, that Dynamic Symmetry book. It is just so intriguing. That's another book I would say. And he's got some YouTube channels that are
actually, I have watched a number of his videos. They're quite interesting how he goes through and breaks down the angles and everything in that.
I found that we do it so naturally anyway that I could go back through many of my paintings that I didn't use it with, but still see where, oh my Lord, I used it intuitively. I put it here. I placed this here, placed this on the square intuitively and didn't even realize I was doing it. But I have to say that I think it has helped with my compositions to do it intentionally.
I think we have this challenge when we're trying to compose something. It's very hard, especially if you're doing this from memory or you're trying to readjust what you see. You're doing an interpretation of a landscape, to create randomness. Randomness is one of the hardest things I think a human can do. Computers can't even do it accurately. The random number generator was never truly random.
If I told you had to make something 2 inches apart all the way across, you couldn't do it. But if I tell you you can't, you'll do it every time.
Yep.
It's the brain just works really funny that way.
Well, my Ralph Oberg was one of my instructors, so he would say, Mama bear, Papa bear, baby bear. And so we do that with trees.
Little shapes. Yeah. It's hard to make it random, and everyone has, I think, a very intuitive inner voice of design of what that random is, and you just have to go back and really pay attention to it.
Shanna, we could go on and talk hours and hours and hours, no doubt, about all of this stuff, right? And
yes.
It's just been a real delight to get your thoughts on a number of, on our favorite subject, painting, art. Well, we didn't get into grandkids. That's my other favorite subject.
Okay, that's mine too. They're my life. I just had a brand new one, so now
neat.
I have many, many, many children between my ex-husbands, all their kids, and my kids, and it's all good. It's all wonderful.
Of course. And I can't wait until I can start giving them all hugs.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. Boy, I'll be glad when this stuff is over and we can travel again. I miss going to Utah and Colorado and the American West. Really, there's not a place in the United States I wouldn't want to see.
I know. Everybody talks about going to Italy and France, and I painted in Giverny and Monet's gardens, and I've been to Tuscany, and I've absolutely loved it. But the United States has everything anyone could ever need to paint, ever. It's just, we have a beautiful country, absolutely beautiful country.
Well, where's your next painting destination then?
Well, I'm going to Mississippi next week.
Mississippi. Wow.
Mississippi,
okay.
Right out of Jackson.
Yeah.
Who knew Mississippi was so beautiful?
It is.
I had no idea the first time I went, and it's incredible. The light on the trees there is just incredible. So that's my next painting adventure. My daughter lives in New Bern, North Carolina, so I get to spend a lot of time out there, and I paint whenever I can.
Another beautiful state.
Beautiful, beautiful. And Utah. From the Red Rocks to the mountains, we have it all. It is just an incredible state.
It is. We spent a week in Bear Lake many years ago.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Hey.
Went to the Pickleville Theater. That was a highlight of entertainment.
Yep.
It was so much fun, but I digress. Well,
I like that 5 hours from me, I can go to Grand Teton National Park.
Yeah.
I can go to Yellowstone National Park. I can go to Arches. I can go to Canyonlands. I have Sun Valley and the Sawtooths. I mean, within 5 hours, I have got incredible country, just incredible landscape country.
Well, where can they find out more about you? What's the best place for them to learn about you? Yeah, okay.
My website, or heaven forbid, social media. That's the evil necessity, isn't it? But I'm a pretty open book. It's pretty easy to find about just about anything about me. But shannakunz.com is my website with all my newest work.
You also have your Inspired to Paint.
Inspiredtopaint.com. Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. I'll provide links in the show notes for that as well. Well, thank you for being on The Artful Painter today.
Oh, I had a ball. I had no shortage of words, did I? As usual.
It was a delight. It was a delight.
It was a delight for me as well. Thank you so much for inviting me. It was an honor.
I very much appreciate Shanna Kunz for taking the time to speak with you and I here on The Artful Painter. I'd like to acknowledge two new associate producers of The Artful Painter. These are people who provide financial support to this podcast with their generous donations. So I would like to take a moment to acknowledge Michelle Stanley as well as Shirley Williams. Thank you both, as well as all the previous donors to The Artful Painter. I appreciate each and every one of you. What you contribute does indeed make a difference. If you too would like to become an associate producer to make a donation to The Artful Painter, go to carlolson.tv and click on the Donate tab. I'd like to leave you with an inspirational thought from Andrew Loomis's book, The Eye of the Painter and the Elements of Beauty. There's a beautiful thought that's expressed beginning on page 14. Let me share it with you. It says, "It is often asked how you can tell a good painting from a bad one. Vincent Price, the actor and art collector, answered this question well when he said, "A good painting is one that pleases you." If that is true, then the next question might be, how do you paint a good picture? I believe that there is a parallel answer here. Paint in a manner that pleases you. Forget the other fellow and how he does it, unless you find his work particularly inspiring. Don't paint his way because of his arguments, his ambiguous explaining, and his salesmanship. The pleasure you feel in doing is the very basis of any individual technique that you may develop. It is to your special advantage that you may see beauty differently from the way others see it. This difference will help you select subjects that are attuned to your taste. It will lead you on to new and exciting fields. The source of beauty is endless, but the true capturing of it is rare. It is a constant challenge. Indeed, how true that is. May your tubes of paints be always full of color, and may your brushstrokes be confident. I'll see you all in the next edition of The Artful Painter.
And we're getting a picture on the TV.